The blood on Dorian Fletcher's hands was still warm when he made the promise that would change his life forever, kneeling beside the man who had saved him from the bandits, only to take an arrow meant for someone else. Master Harlan Cross had been more than an employer to the 23-year-old drifter. The old merchant had given him work when no one else would, had taught him letters and numbers during long wagon rides, had treated him like the son he never had. Now, as the light faded from Harlan's eyes on that dusty frontier road, Dorian gripped the dying man's hand and listened to his final wish. "My daughter," Harlan wheezed, blood flecking his lips. "Liana. She is in Thornridge. You must go to her. Tell her I am sorry I could not make it home." His fingers tightened with surprising strength. "Promise me you will see her safe. Promise me you will stay until she no longer needs protecting. The frontier is no place for a woman alone," Dorian had promised. What else could he do? He had buried Harlan beside the road with stones to mark the grave, then driven the wagon north toward Thornridge with a heavy heart and heavier conscience. He knew nothing about caring for grieving daughters. He was a wanderer, a former soldier who had spent the 3 years since the border wars drifting from job to job, town to town, never staying anywhere long enough to call it home. But a promise to a dying man was sacred, and Dorian Fletcher kept his promises. Thornridge sat on the absolute edge of human civilization, where farmland gave way to the wild territories. The town itself was small, maybe 200 souls, with a main street of packed dirt and buildings made from rough-hewn logs. Beyond it stretched forest and hill country that belonged to the orc clans, those green-skinned people that most humans still called monsters, despite the peace treaty signed 5 years prior. Liana Cross lived in a sturdy farmhouse a mile outside town, and when Dorian arrived with her father's wagon and the news that shattered her world, he saw a woman trying desperately to be strong. She was 20 years old, with her father's sharp eyes and stubborn chin, her dark hair pulled back in a practical braid. She did not cry when he told her, just stood very still in her doorway for a long moment before nodding once and inviting him inside. "He spoke of you," she said quietly, pouring tea with steady hands while Dorian sat awkwardly at her kitchen table. "In his letters. Said you were good with the horses and honest with the accounts. Said you had a soldier's eyes but a decent heart." Dorian did not know what to say to that, so he told her about the ambush, about how her father had pushed a young boy out of the way of an arrow. How it had been quick at the end, no suffering. Some of it was even true. "He made me promise to see you safe," Dorian said finally, meeting her eyes. "To stay until you did not need protecting anymore. I know I am a stranger to you, but I owe your father my life several times over. I intend to keep that promise." Liana studied him for a long moment, and he could see her father in the calculation behind her gaze. "This farm is my livelihood," she said. "I have crops coming in, animals to tend. Winter is 4 months away and I need to prepare. If you truly mean to help, I will not turn away strong hands. But I do not need a guardian, Mr. Fletcher. I need a hired man. Can you do farm work?" "I can learn," Dorian said, and so he stayed. The first weeks were difficult in ways he had not anticipated. The physical labor was hard but familiar enough. Dorian had grown up on a farm before the wars, and the skills came back readily. He mended fences, hauled water, helped Liana bring in the wheat harvest under the late summer sun. The work was honest and good, and he found he did not mind it. What unsettled him was the proximity to the orc territories. From Liana's north field, you could see the tree line where human land ended and orc land began. Sometimes he spotted figures moving in the shadows there, tall and broad-shouldered. The townsfolk spoke of the orcs with casual hatred, calling them greenskins and tuskers, warning that they were just waiting for an excuse to break the treaty and raid the frontier farms. But Liana did not speak of them that way. "They have not bothered me," she said when Dorian mentioned his concerns. "There was one, actually, who helped me last spring when my plow horse threw a shoe and went lame. I was trying to get him back to the barn, and this orc woman came out of the trees, examined his leg, and helped me splint it properly. She spoke good human tongue, knew animal care. She did not ask for payment, just nodded when I thanked her and went back to the forest." Dorian frowned. This did not match what he knew of orcs, which admittedly came mostly from his time fighting against them in the border wars. Those had been warriors, though, raiders who attacked human settlements. Perhaps the clans deeper in their own territory were different. He did not know, and he found he did not particularly want to find out. The seasons changed. Autumn came to the frontier in a blaze of color, and Dorian found a rhythm to his life at the Cross farm. He slept in the small barn loft, took his meals with Liana at her kitchen table, and slowly, carefully, they became something like friends. She was sharp-witted and capable, her father's daughter in every way that mattered. She ran the farm with quiet competence, kept meticulous records, and proved she could outwork him on many days despite being half a head shorter. She also made him laugh, which surprised him. Dorian had not laughed much since the wars. But Liana had a dry sense of humor that caught him off guard. And sometimes over evening meals they would talk about books or argue about the best way to pickle vegetables or share stories from their different childhoods. It was comfortable in a way he had never expected, and more than once he caught himself thinking that maybe he could stay here even after his promise was fulfilled. Maybe this place, this woman with her father's fierce independence, could be something like home. Then winter came early, and everything changed. The first snow fell in late October, weeks before anyone expected it. Dorian was in the north field checking the fence line when he saw the figure stumbling out of the forest. At first he thought it was a bear, something large and dark moving erratically through the white dusted grass. Then the figure fell and he saw the green of skin, the dark of blood against snow. An orc. A woman, he realized as he ran toward her, tall and powerfully built, even collapsed on the ground. She was bleeding from a deep wound in her side, her rough spun tunic soaked through. Her eyes, when they fixed on him, were a startling amber color, and he saw fear flash through them before she tried to push herself up, tried to crawl away from him. "Easy," Dorian said, holding up his hands. "I am not going to hurt you." She said something in the orcish tongue, harsh syllables that sounded like a curse or a warning. Then she collapsed again, her strength giving out. Dorian could see she was dying. The wound was too deep, had bled too much. Any decent person would try to help. But she was an orc, and he was human, and in the settlements they would call him a traitor for even considering it. He thought of Master Harlan pushing a boy out of the way of an arrow. He thought of promises and decency, and the fact that this woman had probably helped animals or people or done nothing to deserve bleeding out in a foreign field. Dorian Fletcher made a decision. He got the orc woman onto his shoulders, grunting under her weight. She was heavier than any human woman would be, solid muscle and dense bone. She struggled weakly, but she was too far gone to truly fight. He carried her across the field toward the farmhouse, calling for Liana. She came out onto the porch and froze when she saw what he was carrying. For a moment, just a moment, he thought she might tell him to take the orc back to the forest. Then her jaw set in that stubborn line he had come to know, and she pushed the door open wide. "Bring her to the kitchen table," Liana said. "I will get bandages and water." They worked together to save the orc woman's life. Dorian had field medicine training from his army days, knew how to clean and stitch a wound. Liana had her mother's old herbal remedies, tinctures and poultices that fought infection. The orc woman drifted in and out of consciousness, sometimes murmuring in her own language, sometimes watching them with those amber eyes that seemed to weigh and measure everything. It was dawn before they finished, both of them exhausted and covered in blood. The orc woman slept fitfully on the kitchen table, her breathing steadier than it had been. Dorian and Liana sat side by side on the floor with their backs against the wall, too tired to move. "The town will not understand if they find out," Liana said quietly. "I know. They might drive us out. Burn the farm. I know that too." She looked at him, and there was something in her eyes he could not quite read. "Why did you save her?" Dorian thought about that. "Because your father would have," he said finally, "and because it was the right thing to do." Liana smiled, small and sad. "He would have," she agreed. "Then, we need to find out who she is, where she came from. Someone will be looking for her." The orc woman woke fully that afternoon, and this time when her amber eyes opened, there was clarity in them. She tried to sit up, winced, and fell back with a grunt. Dorian brought her water, which she accepted warily, drinking in careful sips while studying both of them. "You are on my farm," Liana said slowly, clearly. "You were wounded. We brought you inside and treated your injuries. Do you understand?" The orc woman nodded once. When she spoke, her voice was deep and accented but perfectly understandable. "I understand human tongue. I am Kesha of the Stoneback clan." She touched her side carefully, feeling the bandages. "You saved my life. This is unexpected." "Who hurt you?" Dorian asked. Kesha's expression darkened. "Human hunters. They came across the border into our territory 3 days ago looking for sport. They shot at anything that moved. I was tracking them, trying to drive them back when they ambushed me." She met his eyes. "They laughed when they shot me, said one less greenskin was a good start." Shame burned in Dorian's chest. He wanted to say that not all humans were like that, but the words felt hollow. He had fought in the wars, had killed orcs himself. "Maybe not for sport, but did the difference matter to the dead?" "You need rest," Liana said firmly. "The wound was deep. You should not move for several days at least, not if you want it to heal properly." Kesha shook her head. "I cannot stay. If my clan discovers I am here, there will be trouble. If your people find an orc in your house, there will be worse. I have already put you at risk by bleeding on your land." "Then you should have bled somewhere else," Liana said with a hint of her dry humor. "Too late now. You are my patient and you will stay until you can walk without tearing those stitches, or I will have wasted good thread on you." For a moment, Kesha just stared at her. Then, incredibly, she laughed. It was a rough sound, but genuine. "You are a strange human Liana of this farm." "You have no idea," Dorian muttered, and was rewarded with Liana's elbow in his ribs. Kesha stayed. They moved her to the barn loft after dark, made her a bed of clean straw and blankets where she would be hidden if anyone came by. For 3 days, she rested while Dorian and Liana went about their work as normally as possible. And at night, they brought her food and checked her wound and talked. Dorian learned that Kesha was 25 summers old, which made her just a bit older than him. She was a scout for her clan, responsible for patrolling the border and keeping track of human movements. She had been doing this work since she was 17, since the treaty was signed. Before that, she had been a warrior in the clan's defense force. "You fought in the border wars," she said to Dorian on the 3rd night. It was not a question. "I did. You have a soldier's way of moving, watchful, ready." She studied him in the lamplight. "You killed my people." "Yes." There was no point lying. "And your people killed mine. That is what war is." "It is foolishness," Kesha said flatly. "Fighting over land neither side could truly hold, dying for chiefs and kings who never saw the blood." She touched her side, wincing. "The peace is better. But there are those on both sides who do not want it to last." Like the hunters who shot you, like them. And like the young warriors in my clan who think the treaty makes us weak, they want to prove orc strength by raiding human farms. She looked at him directly. They do not understand that strength is knowing when not to fight. On the fourth day, Kesha's wound showed signs of infection despite their best efforts. She developed a fever that made her delirious, tossing in the barn loft and murmuring in Orcish while Dorian and Liana took turns keeping watch over her. They changed her bandages, forced her to drink willow bark tea, and prayed to whatever gods might listen that she would not die in their barn. It was during one of these long night watches, with Liana asleep on a stool and Kesha quiet for the moment, that Dorian found himself studying the orc woman's face. She was different from human women, obviously. The green skin, the small tusks that protruded from her lower jaw, the pointed ears and strong bone structure. But there was something about her features that he found striking. A fierce beauty in the hard lines and angles, in the way her face was built for surviving in a harsh world. He realized he was staring and looked away, unsettled by his own thoughts. Kesha's fever broke on the fifth morning. She woke weak but clear-eyed, and when Liana checked the wound, it was finally starting to heal properly. That afternoon, Dorian helped Kesha outside for the first time, supporting her weight as she took unsteady steps around the barn. "I should return to my clan soon," she said, though her voice lacked conviction. "They will have missed me by now." "Another few days," Dorian said. "Make sure you are strong enough for the journey." She looked up at him, and there was something unreadable in her amber eyes. "Why do you care? You do not know me. My people and yours are enemies." "We are not enemies," Dorian said. "The war is over." "Is it?" Kesha gestured vaguely toward the south, toward the town. "Tell that to your neighbors. Tell it to the hunters who shot me for sport." Dorian had no answer for that because she was right. The treaty had ended the fighting, but it had not ended the hatred. Humans still saw orcs as monsters, and orcs still saw humans as invaders. People like him and Liana who tried to bridge that gap were rare, and they risked everything to do it. "My father used to say that peace is not something you sign on paper," Liana said from the barn doorway, startling them both. She had a basket of eggs in her arms and a thoughtful expression. "He said it is something you build one person at a time, one choice at a time." "I think he would be glad we helped you, Kesha. I think he would say it was a small brick in a very large wall, but bricks add up eventually." Kesha studied Liana for a long moment. "Your father sounds like he was wise." "He was," Liana said softly. "And he died protecting someone else's child from bandits. I think that means something, do not you? That even in a world full of hatred and fear, there are still people who choose kindness." That night, Dorian lay in his usual spot in the barn loft, unable to sleep. Kesha had insisted on returning to her makeshift bed after dinner, and she was currently asleep a few feet away, her breathing deep and even. In the darkness, he could hear the small sounds of the farm at night. Animals shifting in their stalls, wind moving through the eaves, the distant call of an owl. He thought about Liana's words, about building peace one choice at a time. He thought about his promise to Master Harlan, about staying until Liana did not need protecting anymore. But increasingly, he wondered who was protecting whom. Liana was perfectly capable of taking care of herself. What she had needed, he realized, was not a guardian but a partner, someone to share the load, to stand beside her when she made hard choices like harboring a wounded orc. He thought about Kesha too, about the way she moved with a warrior's grace even injured, about her dry humor and fierce intelligence, so different from the savage monsters the recruiters had described during the war. She was just a person, he realized. A person with her own fears and hopes and reasons for living. How many orcs had he killed without ever knowing who they were? The guilt of that kept him awake until dawn. Kesha left 6 days after they found her. Her wound had healed enough for careful travel, and she insisted she could not impose on their hospitality any longer. Dorian and Liana packed food for her journey, gave her a spare cloak against the cold, and walked with her to the edge of the forest when night fell. "I will not forget this," Kesha said, gripping Liana's hand in the orcish way, wrist to wrist. "You have given me my life. That is a debt that cannot be repaid with words." "You owe us nothing," Liana said. "Just be well, Kesha, be careful of hunters." Kesha turned to Dorian, and there was something complicated in her expression. "You are not what I expected, soldier. Perhaps there is hope for your kind after all." Then she was gone, disappearing into the darkness between the trees like a ghost. Dorian and Liana stood at the forest's edge for a long moment, neither speaking. Finally, Liana sighed and turned back toward the farmhouse. "You think she will be all right?" she asked quietly. "I think she is tougher than both of us put together," Dorian said. "She will be fine." He almost believed it. Winter settled over the frontier in earnest after that, and life returned to a new normal. Dorian and Liana prepared the farm for the cold months, insulating the animal sheds and laying in supplies. They worked side by side through short days and long nights, and sometimes Dorian caught himself watching her in the firelight, wondering what it would be like to stay here forever, to build a life in this place at the edge of the world. He never said anything. His promise had been to stay until she did not need protection, and that day would come eventually. She would find a husband, probably, some good man from town who could give her the life she deserved. Dorian Fletcher was just a drifter, a man with ghosts in his past and no real future to offer. He had no right to think of her as anything more than the daughter of a man he had admired. But the thoughts came anyway, late at night when he was alone. The week before the first real snow, trouble arrived in the form of Edwin Turner. He was a prosperous farmer from closer to town, a widower in his 40s with land and money, and a reputation as a respectable man. He came calling on Liana with flowers from his greenhouse and a smile that showed too many teeth. "Miss Cross," he said, sweeping off his hat in the doorway while Dorian watched from where he was chopping wood. "I hope I am not disturbing you. I wanted to pay my respects and see how you were managing out here all alone." "I am not alone," Liana said coolly. "Mr. Fletcher has been helping with the farm." Turner's gaze flicked to Dorian, assessing and dismissive in the same moment. "Ah yes, your hired man. Very good to have strong hands around, I am sure." He turned back to Liana with that smile again. "But a farm needs more than labor, Miss Cross. It needs proper management, a man's authority. These are dangerous times on the frontier. Orcs just across the border, outlaws on the roads. A woman alone is vulnerable." "I am managing just fine," Liana said, and there was steel in her voice. "I am sure you think so," Turner said in a patronizing tone that made Dorian's hands tighten on the axe handle. "But winter is coming, and I would not forgive myself if something happened to you. I hope you will consider my suit, Miss Cross. I can offer you protection, stability, a proper home in town. You could leave this isolated place behind." "This is my home," Liana said flatly. "The answer is no, Mr. Turner. It was no last month when you asked, and it remains no now." Turner's smile grew strained. "Perhaps you need more time to consider the practicalities of your situation. I will call again in a few weeks." He replaced his hat and nodded curtly before heading back to his wagon. After he left, Liana stood in the doorway for a long moment, her arms wrapped around herself. Dorian set down the axe and walked over, unsure what to say. "He has asked me 4 times now," she said quietly. "He does not understand that no means no. He thinks I am being foolish and emotional, that eventually I will see reason and accept his offer. Do you want me to tell him to stop coming around? Dorian asked. Liana looked at him and something flickered in her eyes. Would you, if I asked? Yes, she smiled, small and genuine. Thank you, but no, I need to handle Edwin Turner myself. I will not have him thinking I need a man to fight my battles. She paused, then added, even if I appreciate having someone who would offer. That night, Dorian lay awake again, thinking about Edwin Turner and his respectable offer. Thinking about the way Liana had looked standing in the doorway, fierce and alone. Thinking about the fact that he had no right to feel the jealousy burning in his chest, no right to want to stand between her and any man who might give her a better life than a drifter could offer. But wanting and having the right were different things, and he wanted anyway. The snow came heavy in late November, blanketing the frontier in white silence. Dorian spent his days keeping paths clear, caring for the animals, and making sure the farmhouse stayed warm. Liana cooked and mended and kept her father's account books, and in the evenings they sat by the fire and talked or read or simply enjoyed the quiet companionship. It was a good life, Dorian thought. Simple but honest, the kind of life he had not known he was looking for. He tried not to think about how it would end, about the day when his promise would be fulfilled and he would have to move on. Tried not to think about leaving her. Then, on the first day of December, Kesha came back. Dorian was checking the fence line near the forest when she emerged from the trees, moving more carefully than he remembered. She looked thinner, he thought, and there was something haunted in her amber eyes. He raised a hand in greeting, surprised but pleased to see her alive and well. Kesha. I did not expect to see you again. Nor I you, she said. But I need your help. I need to ask something that may be impossible. They walked back to the farmhouse together, and Liana welcomed Kesha with genuine warmth, ushering her inside and pressing hot tea into her hands. The orc woman sat at the kitchen table looking uncomfortable with the hospitality, her broad frame too large for the human-sized chair. My clan elder, Grandmother Raka, is dying, Kesha said without preamble. She is very old, more than 80 summers, and this winter has been hard on her. She is asking for something before she passes. A medicine. What kind of medicine? Liana asked. Ironroot. It grows in the caves near Thornridge on the human side of the border. The clan's healers say it might ease her pain, might give her a few more months. But no orc can cross into town territory to gather it without risking an incident. If humans saw us near their settlement, there would be panic, maybe violence. Kesha looked between them, her expression carefully neutral. I thought of you. You saved my life. Perhaps you would be willing to gather ironroot for an old orc woman you will never meet. Of course, Liana said immediately. We can go to the caves tomorrow, can we not, Dorian? Dorian nodded, though his mind was already working through the logistics. The caves were a half-day's journey from the farm, and gathering ironroot in winter would be dangerous. But Kesha had come to them for help, had trusted them enough to ask. That meant something. There is more, Kesha said, and now she looked uncomfortable. Grandmother Raka wants to thank you herself. When I told her how you saved me, she said she would like to meet the humans brave enough to harbor a wounded orc. She has asked if you would come to our clan's winter settlement, bring the ironroot, and allow her to express her gratitude properly. The kitchen fell silent. Dorian and Liana looked at each other, and he could see his own shock reflected in her eyes. An invitation to an orc clan settlement was unheard of. Humans who went into orc territory did not usually come back. That is a great honor, Liana said carefully. But also very dangerous for us, is it not? Yes, Kesha admitted. Some in my clan do not agree with Grandmother Raka's decision. They think humans cannot be trusted, that this is foolishness. There may be hostility. I cannot promise your safety, though I will do everything in my power to protect you." She leaned forward, her amber eyes intense. "But Grandmother Raka is our elder, our leader. Her word is law. If she says you are guests, then you are guests. And if you show that kind of trust, it might change minds. It might build the peace your father spoke of, Liana." Liana looked at Dorian, a question in her eyes. He knew what she was asking. This was dangerous, potentially fatal. They could die just for setting foot in orc territory. But they could also do something important, something that might matter beyond their small corner of the world. He thought of Master Harlan pushing a boy out of the way of an arrow. He thought of promises and choices and building peace one brick at a time. "I will go if you go," Dorian said to Liana, "but this has to be your decision. It is your farm, your risk to take." Liana took a deep breath and nodded once, that stubborn set to her jaw that meant her mind was made up. "We will come," she said to Kesha. "We will bring your grandmother the iron root and accept her invitation. When do we leave?" Relief flooded Kesha's face, so profound that Dorian realized how much this had cost her to ask. "Tomorrow, if you are willing. Grandmother Raka grows weaker each day. Time is precious." They spent that evening preparing for the journey. Dorian checked their supplies, made sure they had warm clothes and good boots. Liana packed food and medicine, including her mother's old healer's kit. Neither of them spoke much about what they were doing, about the magnitude of the risk. But Dorian caught her watching him across the kitchen as he sharpened his knife, and when their eyes met, he saw the same mix of fear and determination he felt himself. "We do not have to do this," he said quietly. "Yes, we do," Liana replied. "Because if we do not, if we let fear keep us safe in this farmhouse, then we are no better than the people who shot Kesha for sport. We are no better than Edwin Turner, who sees orcs as monsters and thinks I need protecting from the world." She smiled, sad and fierce. "My father built his life on small acts of courage. I think he would want me to do the same." That night, Dorian lay awake for a long time, staring at the barn loft ceiling and wondering if he would see another sunrise. Tomorrow they would walk into orc territory, would trust their lives to people who had every reason to hate humans. It was possibly the most foolish thing he had ever done, but it was also possibly the most important, and he found he was not afraid, not really. Whatever happened, at least they would face it doing the right thing. In the morning, they set out for the caves. The iron root grew in the deep places where water seeped through limestone and minerals built up over centuries. Dorian and Liana descended into the cave system with lanterns and heavy gloves, following the directions Kesha had given them. The air was cold and damp, and their breath misted in the lamplight as they picked their way over slippery stones. They found the iron root growing in a side chamber, its distinctive red-brown roots spreading across the cave wall like veins. Dorian carefully dug out several large pieces while Liana held the light, and they packed the precious medicine into canvas bags. The whole expedition took most of the day, and by the time they climbed back out of the caves, the sun was already sinking toward the horizon. Kesha was waiting at the forest edge as planned, and her eyes widened when she saw how much iron root they had gathered. "This is more than enough," she said, taking one of the bags carefully. "Grandmother Raka will be very pleased." "Then we should not keep her waiting," Liana said, adjusting her pack. "Lead the way." The journey into orc territory was both beautiful and terrifying. The forest closed around them as they followed Kesha deeper into lands that no human had walked peacefully in generations. Everything was larger here, wilder. The trees grew taller. The game trails were marked with prints that made Dorian's soldier instincts scream warnings. But Kesha moved through it all with easy confidence, and they followed in her wake. They walked for hours as night fell, and Dorian found himself next to Kesha at one point while Liana caught her breath. "Your people will not be happy to see us," he said quietly. "No," Kesha agreed. "Many will not, but Grandmother Raka's word is absolute. As long as she lives, you are protected." She glanced at him, her amber eyes reflecting the moonlight. "I will make sure nothing happens to you. I owe you my life, Dorian Fletcher. I will not let harm come to those who saved me." There was something in the way she said his name, in the intensity of her gaze, that made his pulse quicken. He looked away, unsettled by his own reaction. He should not be feeling anything for this orc woman, this stranger from the other side of the war. But there was something about her strength, her fierce loyalty and uncompromising honesty, that called to something deep in his chest. He pushed the thoughts away. They had more immediate concerns. The Stoneback clan's winter settlement appeared through the trees like something from a dream. Large communal buildings made of stone and timber clustered around a central fire pit, smoke rising from multiple chimneys. Dorian could see figures moving in the darkness, tall shapes that stopped and stared as Kesha led the two humans into their midst. The reaction was immediate and hostile. Orcs emerged from the buildings, warriors with weapons. Families with children pulled protectively behind them. Voices rose in the orcish tongue, angry and afraid. Dorian felt Liana move closer to him, and he resisted the urge to reach for his knife. That would only make things worse. Then a voice cut through the commotion, speaking in perfect human tongue with the weight of absolute authority. "Peace. These are my guests." The crowd parted, and Grandmother Raka emerged into the firelight. She was ancient, her green skin weathered and scarred, her body bent with age. But her amber eyes were sharp as knife blades, and when she looked at Dorian and Liana, he felt measured and judged in a single glance. "You are the humans who saved my scout," she said. "It was not a question. You are welcome in my clan by my word and honor. Come, we will speak." They followed the old orc into one of the larger buildings, a warm space lit by a central fire and lined with furs. Kesha came with them, and several other orcs that Dorian guessed were clan elders or important warriors. Everyone sat on cushions around the fire, and Grandmother Raka fixed her gaze on Dorian and Liana. "You brought the iron root," she said. Liana pulled out the canvas bags and offered them with a respectful nod. "We hope it helps ease your pain, Grandmother." The old orc took the bags and handed them to another orc, probably a healer. Then she studied Liana with something that might have been approval. "Kesha told me what you did, how you took her into your home though it would brand you as traitor to your own kind. How you tended her wounds and asked nothing in return." She shifted her gaze to Dorian. "And you, soldier, she says you have killed orcs in battle but saved her life when it mattered." "Why?" Dorian met her eyes steadily. "Because the war is over. Because she was hurt and needed help. Because it was the right thing to do." "Simple reasons," Grandmother Raka said, "but simple is often truest." She leaned back, wincing slightly. "I am dying. This iron root will give me a few more months perhaps, but not much more. Before I go to join my ancestors, I want to see peace take root between our peoples. Real peace, not the paper treaty that both sides ignore." She gestured around the circle. "Most of my clan thinks I am foolish. They say humans cannot be trusted, that you will always see us as monsters." Are they right? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Dorian thought carefully before answering, aware that he was speaking not just for himself but possibly for all humanity in this moment. "Some humans will always hate," he said slowly, "just as some orcs will always hate. Fear and prejudice do not disappear because someone signs a treaty, but not all humans think that way. Liana and her father did not. I do not." He paused, then added, "I fought in the border wars. I killed your people because I was told it was necessary. that orcs were savages who wanted to destroy us. But now I have met Kesha. I have seen that she is brave and honorable, that she cares for her clan and understands mercy. If one orc can be like that, then probably all of you are just people no different than us. We are not so different, I think. We all just want to survive to protect what we love. Grandmother Raka nodded slowly. You speak with wisdom, young soldier. Perhaps there is hope. She looked at Liana. And you, daughter of the merchant who traded fairly with my people before the war. What do you think? I think my father was right, Liana said firmly. Peace is built one person at a time, one choice at a time. We chose to save Kesha. You chose to invite us here. Those are small things, but they matter. If enough people make those choices, maybe eventually the fear will fade. Maybe, the old orc agreed. But it will take time and I will not see it finished. That is for you younger ones to build. She was quiet for a moment, then said something that changed everything. I have a proposal for you humans, a way to build that peace in a manner that cannot be ignored. Dorian felt a prickle of apprehension. What kind of proposal? A bond between our peoples. A symbol that we can coexist, even thrive together. Grandmother Raka's gaze fixed on him with uncomfortable intensity. I have watched you, soldier, since you entered my settlement. I have seen how you look at Kesha when you think no one notices, and I have seen how she looks at you. Heat flooded Dorian's face. Beside him, he heard Kesha make a small, startled sound. Liana was very still. I propose a marriage, Grandmother Raka said calmly, as if she were discussing the weather. Between you, Dorian Fletcher, and Kesha of the Stoneback clan. A human man and an orc woman, bound in the old way. It would prove that our peoples can be family, not just neighbors. It would give me hope before I die that the future might be different. The silence in the building was absolute. Dorian could not breathe, could not think. Marriage to Kesha. He had known her for barely 2 weeks, most of which she had spent wounded in his barn. The idea was insane. But even as he thought it, he realized the old orc was right about one thing. He had been watching Kesha, had been drawn to her in ways he did not fully understand. And the idea of binding his life to hers, of standing with her against the world's hatred, filled him not with horror but with something that felt dangerously like hope. That is impossible, Liana said, and there was something strained in her voice. They barely know each other. You cannot ask them to marry for political reasons. I am not asking, Grandmother Raka said. I am proposing. There is a difference. She looked at Dorian. I will not force this. If you refuse, you and your woman may leave with my blessing and we will find another way to build peace. But if you accept, if you are willing to try, then I will support this union with all my authority. I will make Kesha my heir, which means she will lead this clan when I die. You would become part of that leadership, human. You would have a voice in how we deal with your people. That is no small thing. Dorian's mind raced. This was madness. He could not marry Kesha, he barely knew her, and what about his promise to Master Harlan? What about Liana? He looked at Liana and something in his chest twisted at the expression on her face. She looked hurt, he realized. Actually hurt by this proposal. But why would she care unless she had feelings for him? Unless all these months of working side by side, of quiet companionship and shared laughter, had meant more to her than he had allowed himself to believe. And he had been too blind and too convinced of his own unworthiness to see it. I need to speak with Liana, Dorian said, his voice rough. Alone. Grandmother Raka waved a hand. Go, but do not take too long. I am an old orc and I need my sleep. Dorian and Liana stepped outside into the cold night air, walking away from the buildings until they were alone in the darkness. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Liana laughed, a sharp sound without humor. I suppose this is what I get for thinking peace was simple, she said. Of course it would require you marrying someone else. Liana, Dorian started, but she cut him off. You should do it, she said, her voice carefully controlled. It is a good opportunity. You could actually make a difference, build something real between humans and orcs. My father would have told you to do it. I do not care what your father would say, Dorian said, surprised by the heat in his own voice. I care what you think, what you feel. She looked at him then, really looked at him, and he saw everything she had been hiding for months laid bare in her eyes. What I feel does not matter, Dorian. You made a promise to my father and you have kept it, but you do not owe me anything more than that. You certainly do not owe me your future. That is not what I asked, Dorian said. He stepped closer, his heart pounding. I am asking if you want me to stay. Not because of a promise. Not because your father asked me to, but because you want me to. Of course I want you to stay, Liana said, and now her careful control cracked. I have wanted you to stay since the first month, since I realized you were not just keeping a promise but actually cared about this farm, about me. But I never said anything because you made it clear you were a drifter, that you would leave eventually. And now this orc elder is offering you something important, a chance to matter, and I will not be the selfish woman who asks you to choose her instead. Dorian reached out and took her hands, feeling them tremble in his grip. What if I want to choose you? He said quietly. What if the reason I never left is because somewhere along the way, this stopped being about a promise and started being about the fact that I love you? Liana's breath caught. You love me. Yes, Dorian said, and it felt like stepping off a cliff. I have loved you for months and been too much of a coward to say it. I kept telling myself I was not good enough, that you deserved better than a drifter with ghosts in his past. But the truth is I love you, Liana Cross. I love your stubborn independence and your dry wit, and the way you stand up to men twice your size without flinching. I love working beside you and arguing about vegetables and sitting by the fire in the evenings. I love this life we have built together, and I do not want to give it up. Tears shone in Liana's eyes. Then do not, she whispered. Tell the old orc no, come home with me and stay forever. Dorian wanted to. God, he wanted to say yes, to walk away from this impossible proposal and build a future with Liana. But he thought about grandmother Raka's words, about building peace one choice at a time. He thought about the hatred he had seen in Edwin Turner's eyes when he talked about orcs, the casual violence of the hunters who had shot Kesha for sport. He thought about the fact that thousands of people on both sides were trapped by fear and prejudice, unable to see each other as anything but enemies. And he thought about Kesha, brave and loyal and alone in a world that had no place for an orc who believed in peace. I cannot, he said, and it felt like tearing out his own heart. I cannot walk away from this, Liana. It is too important. If I say no, we will go home and be happy together, but nothing will change. The hatred will continue. People will keep dying in stupid conflicts because neither side can see the other as human. But if I say yes, if I marry Kesha and become part of her clan, maybe I can help bridge that gap. Maybe I can save lives by proving that humans and orcs can be family. So you are choosing duty over love, Liana said bitterly. Just like my father did over and over until duty killed him. No, Dorian said firmly. I am choosing to do the right thing even though it costs me everything. There is a difference. He cupped her face in his hands, memorizing every feature. I love you, I will always love you, but I cannot be with you and live with myself if I turn away from this opportunity. I am sorry, I am so sorry. Liana pulled away from him, wrapping her arms around herself. I understand, she said, and her voice was hollow. I do not like it, but I understand. You should go back inside and tell them yes, I will wait here. Liana, just go, Dorian. He went, every step away from her like walking through broken glass. When he returned to the building, all eyes turned to him. He found Kesha in the circle and met her amber gaze directly. "I need to ask you something first," Dorian said to her. "Do you want this? Not because your elder commands it, but because you actually want to marry me." Kesha was quiet for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then she spoke, and her voice was careful. "I respect you, Dorian Fletcher. You saved my life and showed me that not all humans are enemies. I think we could build something worthwhile together for both our peoples. But I will not lie and say I love you. We do not know each other well enough for that. What I can offer is loyalty, partnership, and the willingness to try." She tilted her head slightly. "Is that enough for you?" It was honest, at least. More honest than he probably deserved. Dorian took a deep breath and nodded. "It is enough," he said. Then, to Grandmother Raka, "I accept your proposal. I will marry Kesha of the Stoneback clan." The old orc's face split in a satisfied smile. "Good, very good. We will hold the ceremony in 3 days by the old traditions. That will give time for word to spread, for other clans to send witnesses. This will be remembered, young human. You have made a choice that will echo through generations." Dorian hoped she was right. Because if this did not matter, if it did not change anything, then he had just destroyed his own happiness for nothing. The next 3 days were a blur of preparation and painful encounters. Dorian barely saw Liana, who kept to the guest quarters and spoke to him only when necessary. When they did talk, she was painfully polite, treating him like a stranger. It hurt more than anger would have. Kesha, by contrast, was surprisingly kind. She seemed to understand that he was struggling, and she did not push. They talked several times, getting to know each other better, and Dorian found himself genuinely liking the orc woman. She was intelligent and perceptive, with a warrior's pragmatism and a leader's vision. In another life, in another situation, he thought they could have been good friends. But friends were not the same as lovers, and he mourned the future he had given up with Liana. On the morning of the 3rd day, Grandmother Raka called him to her quarters. The old orc looked frailer than before, the iron root helping but not healing. She gestured for him to sit, then studied him with those sharp amber eyes. "You are in love with the other human," she said bluntly. "The woman, Liana, there was no point denying it. Yes. And yet you are still going through with this marriage to Kesha." "Yes. Why?" Grandmother Raka leaned forward. "I thought humans believed in marrying for love. That is what your stories always say." Dorian laughed bitterly. "Some do. But I believe in doing what is right, even when it costs me. You said this marriage could build peace between our peoples. That is worth more than my personal happiness." The old orc was quiet for a long moment. Then she said something that shook his world. "What if I told you there was another way? A way to build that peace without sacrificing your love?" Dorian stared at her. "What do you mean?" "I have been thinking," Grandmother Raka said slowly, "about what makes a marriage strong, about what makes a symbol meaningful, and I realized I was wrong to ask you to marry Kesha when your heart belongs to another." She smiled slightly. "I am old, but I am not fool enough to think a loveless marriage will inspire anyone. It will just be 2 people doing their duty, and there is no magic in that." "Then what are you proposing?" "Marry the woman you love," Grandmother Raka said. "Marry Liana Cross and bring her to live with you here in my clan. Let a human woman become part of our family. Let her children be both human and orc in culture, if not in blood. That is a stronger symbol, I think. That is a marriage built on love that also serves peace." Hope blazed in Dorian's chest, so fierce it hurt. "But what about Kesha? You said she would be your heir if I married her." "She will be my heir regardless," the old orc said. "That decision has nothing to do with you. I was foolish to tie the 2 together." She paused, then added, But if you marry Liana and join my clan, I still want you to serve as advisor to Kesha when she leads. Your knowledge of human ways, your ability to bridge both peoples, that is valuable. Will you agree to that? Yes, Dorian said without hesitation. Yes, of course. But wait, you are asking me to bring Liana here to live with orcs, to leave her farm. I am asking if she would be willing, Grandmother Raka corrected. The farm could be maintained by someone else, visited regularly, or perhaps she could find a way to keep it while also spending time here. These details can be worked out. The question is whether she loves you enough to try this strange life and whether you love her enough to ask. Dorian stood abruptly. I need to find her. Yes, Grandmother Raka agreed. You do, and Dorian, do not waste time. Life is shorter than you think, and love is precious. I learned that too late, and I will not see you make the same mistake. He found Liana at the edge of the settlement, standing alone and looking toward the south where her farm lay. When she heard him approach, she did not turn around. Have you come to say goodbye before the ceremony? She asked, her voice carefully neutral. No, Dorian said. I have come to ask you a question. Actually, several questions. But the most important one is this: will you marry me? Now she turned, her eyes wide with shock. What? Grandmother Raka has released me from the agreement to marry Kesha, Dorian said, the words tumbling out. She realized it was wrong to ask people to marry without love, so she made a different proposal. She wants me to marry you if you will have me and bring you here to live with the clan. To build a life that bridges both our peoples. I know it is insane. I know I am asking you to leave your home and live among orcs who might hate you. But I love you, Liana. I have loved you for so long, and I cannot imagine a future without you in it. So I am asking, will you take a chance on this? Will you marry me and help me build something impossible? Liana stared at him for a long moment, and he could not read her expression. Then, suddenly, she laughed. It was a real laugh, bright and joyful, and it transformed her face. You are asking me to abandon my farm to live with orcs and help you broker peace between species, she said. You are asking me to give up everything safe and normal for a life that will probably be difficult and dangerous, and unlike anything I ever imagined. Yes, Dorian admitted. I suppose I am. Then my answer is yes, Liana said, and now she was crying and smiling at the same time. Yes, I will marry you, you ridiculous man. I will follow you anywhere, do anything as long as we are together. I love you, Dorian Fletcher. I have loved you since you promised my father you would keep me safe, even though I did not need keeping. I love you for seeing me as an equal, for standing with me instead of in front of me. I love you for trying to sacrifice your happiness for peace, and I love you even more for choosing love when given the chance. So yes, 1,000 times yes. He pulled her into his arms and kissed her, and it felt like coming home. Like everything he had been searching for without knowing it, all wrapped up in this fierce, stubborn, wonderful woman. When they finally broke apart, they were both laughing through tears. We are insane, Liana said. You know that, right? This is the craziest thing anyone has ever done. Probably, Dorian agreed. But it is also right. I can feel it. They went back to Grandmother Raka together, hand in hand, and told her they accepted. The old orc looked deeply satisfied, as if she had planned this all along. Maybe she had. Dorian would not put it past her. Then we will hold a wedding ceremony tomorrow, Grandmother Raka declared. By both orcish and human traditions, so that everyone can see this is a true union. Kesha, you will stand as witness for our clan. Dorian and Liana, you will speak your vows before both our peoples, and we will all bear witness to this new beginning. That night, the settlement was transformed. Word had spread that the wedding would be between the human man and the human woman, not between human and orc, and the reaction was mixed. Some of the orcs seemed relieved that their scout would not have to marry outside their kind. Others were disappointed, feeling that a mixed marriage would have been a stronger symbol. But Grandmother Raka's word was law, and everyone prepared for the ceremony with energy. Dorian spent the evening with Liana, talking about the future they would build together. She had questions about living with the clan, about how they would manage her farm, about what their children might face growing up in this strange in-between world. He had answers to some of them and none to others, but they worked through it together, planning and dreaming and slowly believing that maybe this could actually work. Kesha found him before he went to sleep, her expression serious. "I want you to know I am glad this worked out as it did," she said quietly. "You and Liana belong together. Anyone can see that. But I also want you to know I will hold you to your promise to advise me when I lead this clan. We need your knowledge, your ability to see both sides." "Will you truly stay and help?" "I will," Dorian promised. "You saved my life by trusting us enough to ask for help. I will not abandon you now." Kesha smiled, and it transformed her face. "Good. Then I think we will build something good here, the three of us, something that lasts." The wedding ceremony took place at sunset the next day, with the whole clan gathered around the central fire and witnesses from 2 other orc clans who had traveled to see this historic moment. Grandmother Raka presided, speaking in both human tongue and orcish to ensure everyone understood. Dorian and Liana stood together facing the old orc, and when it came time for vows, Dorian spoke from his heart. "I promise to stand with you through whatever comes," he said, holding Liana's hands. "To see you as my equal and my partner, to listen to your wisdom and share your burdens. I promise to build with you a life that matters, that makes the world a little better for our being in it. And I promise to love you, Liana Cross, for all the days I have left." Liana's voice was steady when she replied. "I promise to walk beside you, not behind or ahead. To challenge you when you are wrong and support you when you are right. I promise to be brave with you, to take the risks that matter and build something impossible. And I promise to love you, Dorian Fletcher, for as long as I breathe." Grandmother Raka blessed their union in the orcish way, marking their foreheads with ash from the sacred fire. Then she had them exchange tokens, simple bands of iron that Kesha had forged herself as a gift. When the old orc pronounced them married, the entire clan erupted in cheers, and Dorian pulled Liana into his arms and kissed her while orcs and humans alike celebrated around them. The feast that followed lasted well into the night. Dorian and Liana sat at Grandmother Raka's right hand, a place of honor, and they ate and drank and told stories. The orc clan members who had been suspicious gradually warmed to them, especially when Liana showed genuine interest in their customs, and Dorian demonstrated respect for their traditions. Kesha gave a speech in Orcish that was translated for them, speaking about how these 2 humans had saved her life and shown that peace was possible. She challenged her clan to welcome them, to learn from them, and to build a future where orc and human children could play together without fear. It was late when Grandmother Raka finally pulled Dorian aside, gesturing for him to walk with her away from the celebration. They stood at the edge of the firelight, and the old orc looked up at the stars. "I have one more request," she said quietly. "Though this one is truly impossible, and I do not expect you to succeed." Dorian felt a chill. "What is it?" "When I die, which will be soon, there will be a gathering of all the orc clans in this region. They will come to honor my passing and to recognize Kesha as the new leader of the Stoneback clan. It is tradition." Grandmother Raka looked at him. "I want you to come to that gathering. I want you to stand before all the clan elders and speak about what you have learned living with us." I want you to ask them to consider peace with humans not as a treaty forced upon us, but as a genuine possibility for the future." "They will never listen to me," Dorian said. "I am human, an outsider, an enemy." "Perhaps," the old orc agreed. "But you are also Kesha's advisor and my invited guest. You are the human who married for love and chose to live with orcs. Your story has power, Dorian Fletcher. Whether they listen or not, you must tell it. That is the task I am asking of you, the impossible one that no human has ever tried." Dorian thought about that. Thought about standing before orc elders and asking them to trust the people who had warred against them for generations. It was insane. It was dangerous. It would probably fail, but it might also work. And if there was even a chance it could make a difference, he had to try. "I will do it," he said. "When the time comes, I will speak before your clan elders. I promise." Grandmother Raka smiled. "Good. Then I can die knowing I did everything possible to build a better world. The rest is up to you young ones." She did not die that night, or even that week. The Iron Root gave her more time, enough to see Dorian and Liana truly settle into clan life. Enough to watch as they worked side by side with Kesha, learning orcish customs and teaching human ones in return. Enough to see the first seeds of real friendship form between the species. Dorian and Liana kept the farm, but spent most of their time with the clan, traveling back every few weeks to maintain the property and check on things. Edwin Turner heard about the marriage and stopped calling, spreading rumors in town that Liana had abandoned civilized society to live with savages. Some people believed him. Others, a smaller group, began to wonder if maybe the orcs were not as monstrous as they had been taught. Winter deepened, and Dorian found himself genuinely happy for the first time in years. He loved his wife, loved the life they were building together. He loved the challenge of bridging two cultures, of finding common ground between species that had been enemies. It was hard work, frustrating and often painful, but it mattered in a way nothing else ever had. Kesha became a close friend to both of them, and they spent long evenings around the fire discussing philosophy and politics and dreams for the future. She was brilliant and driven, and Dorian knew she would be a good leader when her time came. He worked with her to plan for that future, to think about how the clan could open relationships with nearby human settlements without triggering violence. They had been living with the clan for nearly 2 months when Grandmother Raka finally called them to her bedside. She was failing rapidly now, the Iron Root no longer enough to sustain her. Dorian and Liana sat with her, along with Kesha and several other clan elders. "The gathering will be in 3 days, the old orc said, her voice weak but clear. "I have sent word to all the clans. They will come to say farewell and to witness Kesha's ascension." She looked at Dorian. "You will speak as promised. You will tell them what you have learned here." "But I have one more thing to ask." "Anything," Dorian said. "Tell them about your promise," Grandmother Raka said. "The one you made to Liana's father. Tell them how you kept that promise by staying with her, by protecting her not through violence but through partnership. Tell them that the same kind of promise can exist between our peoples, that humans and orcs can be family, bound by honor and loyalty rather than blood." She smiled faintly. "Stories have power, young human. Tell them a good one." She died that night, peacefully in her sleep, and the entire clan mourned. Dorian and Liana mourned too, for the old orc who had seen something in them worth believing in, who had given them a chance to prove that peace was possible. The gathering was massive, hundreds of orcs from dozens of clans converging on the winter settlement. Dorian had never seen so many orcs in one place, and the sight was both impressive and terrifying. These were warriors and elders, hunters and craftspeople, all coming to honor Grandmother Raka and witness the new order of leadership. The funeral rites took place on the first day, and they were beautiful and solemn. On the second day, Kesha was formally recognized as leader of the Stoneback clan, accepting the responsibility with quiet dignity. And on the third day, the gathering turned to matters of policy and future. Dorian stood at the edge of the great circle, Liana at his side, and waited for his moment. Several clan leaders spoke about the state of the peace, about tensions with humans and the need for vigilance. Some called for a return to isolationism, for cutting all ties with human settlements. Others argued for maintaining the treaty while keeping distance. Then Kesha stood and called Dorian forward. "I present to you Dorian Fletcher," she said in the orcish tongue, which was translated for him later. "Human, husband, friend. He lives with our clan by the will of Grandmother Raka. He has learned our ways and taught us his. He has wisdom to share, if you will listen." The silence that followed was heavy with skepticism. Dorian felt hundreds of amber eyes fix on him, measuring and judging. He took a breath and began to speak, hoping the translator Kesha had arranged would convey his meaning accurately. "I am human," he started simply. 3 years ago, I would have killed any orc I encountered without hesitation because I believed you were monsters. I fought in the border wars. I have orc blood on my hands, and I cannot change that." The crowd stirred, hostile murmurs rippling through the gathered clans. But Dorian pressed on. "But then I made a promise to a dying man. I promised to protect his daughter, to see her safe. I thought that meant staying until she found a husband, until she no longer needed a hired hand on her farm. I did not understand what that promise really required." He glanced at Liana, drew strength from her presence. "Keeping that promise meant helping her harbor a wounded orc in our barn. It meant facing the hatred of my own people for showing kindness to yours. It meant following that orc here, into your territory, because she asked for help. It meant trusting Grandmother Raka when she invited us to stay, to learn, to become part of this clan." Dorian met the eyes of the clan leaders directly. "I learned that keeping a promise to protect someone does not mean standing in front of them with a sword. It means standing beside them as an equal. It means building something together that neither could build alone. And I learned that the same principle applies to our peoples." He paused, letting the translator catch up. "Grandmother Raka asked me to do something impossible. She asked me to speak before you and say that peace between humans and orcs is not just possible but necessary. That we can be family, bound by honor and mutual respect. And I am here to tell you that she was right." The crowd erupted in argument, some orcs shouting in anger while others called for quiet. Kesha raised her hand, commanding silence through sheer force of will. "Let him finish," she ordered. Dorian nodded gratefully and continued. "I am not saying humans and orcs should forget the past. The wars happened. The hatred is real, but we can choose what comes next. We can choose to build something better, one friendship at a time, one shared meal at a time, one marriage at a time." He gestured to Liana. "My wife and I are proof that it works. We have lived with the Stoneback clan for 2 months. We have learned to speak your language, to understand your customs. And you have welcomed us, taught us, made us family. If it can work in one clan, it can work in others. What are you asking?" One of the elder orcs demanded. "That we throw open our lands to humans. That we forget they invaded our territory and killed our children." "No," Dorian said firmly. "I am asking that you consider the possibility of partnership, not submission, not forgetting, but mutual cooperation. Share trade with border settlements. Allow human scholars to learn your crafts in exchange for teaching them ours. Create bonds between our peoples so that when conflicts arise, there are relationships to prevent them from becoming wars." He took a breath. "I am asking that you make promises to each other, human and orc, and then keep those promises. That is how trust is built. That is how peace becomes real. The gathering dissolved into heated debate after that, and Dorian stepped back to let the orcs argue among themselves. He had said what he came to say. Whether they listened was beyond his control. He and Liana retreated to the edge of the settlement, exhausted and uncertain. Kesha found them there as the sun was setting. "That was well done," she said quietly. "You spoke with honesty and courage." Grandmother Raka would have been proud. "Will it change anything?" Liana asked. Kesha was silent for a moment. "I do not know," she admitted. "The elders are divided. Some think you are a spy or a fool. Others are intrigued by what you represent. It will take time for them to decide." She smiled slightly. "But you have planted a seed. That is more than any human has done before." The gathering concluded the next day with no clear resolution. Some clans pledged to consider more open relations with humans. Others declared they would maintain the treaty but nothing more. A few, the most conservative, rejected even the possibility of cooperation. But 3 clans approached Dorian privately before they left. They wanted to send representatives to visit the Stoneback clan, to see for themselves what human-orc cooperation looked like. They wanted to meet with him again, to discuss the practical details of building trade relationships with human settlements. It was not a victory, exactly. But it was a beginning. Dorian and Liana returned to the winter settlement with Kesha, and life continued its strange new rhythm. Winter gave way to early spring, and with the thaw came news from the outside world. Edwin Turner had died of fever, his farm passing to distant relatives. A new merchant had opened trade routes near the border and was asking about buying goods from orc craftspeople. The town of Thornridge was debating whether to send an official delegation to the orc territories to discuss peace terms. Small changes, all of them, but they added up. One warm evening in late spring, Dorian and Liana walked to the edge of the clan's territory, to the place where they had first brought Kesha after finding her wounded. The grass was green now, wildflowers blooming in brilliant colors. It looked nothing like the blood-stained snow of that first meeting. "You ever regret it?" Liana asked quietly. "Giving up the simple life we could have had, just the 2 of us at the farm?" Dorian considered that seriously. "Sometimes," he admitted. "When things are difficult or dangerous, when I wonder if any of this will actually make a lasting difference. But then, I remember what Grandmother Raka said about building peace 1 brick at a time. And I think about the friends we have made here, the lives we have touched. I think about the children who will grow up in a world we helped create, where humans and orcs can coexist." He pulled Liana closer. "No, I do not regret it. This life is harder, but it is also more meaningful than anything I have ever done." Liana leaned her head on his shoulder. "Good. Because I have news that might make things more complicated." Dorian felt a flutter of anticipation. "What news?" "I am pregnant," Liana said simply. "The clan healer confirmed it yesterday. We are going to have a child, Dorian, a human child who will grow up with orcs as family." For a moment, Dorian could not speak. Then he laughed, pure joy flooding through him, and he spun Liana around until she was laughing too. A child. They were going to have a child, here in this impossible place they had made their home. "That is wonderful," he said when he finally set her down. "That is the best news I have ever heard. Our baby will be the first human born into an orc clan by choice," Liana said, wonder in her voice. "They will grow up speaking both languages, learning both cultures. They will be proof that it is possible." "They will be amazing," Dorian said. "Just like their mother." Kesha was delighted when they told her the news, and she immediately declared that the entire clan would help raise the child. It became a communal project, with orc women sharing parenting wisdom and craftspeople making cradles and toys. The acceptance was total and genuine, and Dorian felt his heart swell with gratitude for these people who had welcomed them so completely. More clan representatives came to visit throughout the summer, and slowly, carefully, relationships began to form between orc clans and human settlements. There were setbacks, moments when old hatreds flared and threatened to destroy everything. But there were also breakthroughs, moments when understanding bloomed and people from both sides chose cooperation over conflict. Dorian worked tirelessly as Kesha's advisor, helping her navigate the complex politics of building peace. He traveled to human towns with orc delegations, speaking about his experiences and vouching for the clan's good intentions. He helped negotiate trade agreements and settlement boundaries, always working to find solutions that benefited both sides. It was hard work, and sometimes dangerous. There were humans who hated him for his choices, who called him traitor and greenskin lover. There were orcs who distrusted him, who thought his presence in the clan was a threat. But there were also people on both sides who recognized what he and Liana represented, who supported their vision of a different future. Their daughter was born in early autumn, delivered with the help of orc midwives and human herbs. They named her Liana Fletcher, honoring both Liana's mother and the orc elder who had made their life possible. She was perfect, with her mother's dark hair and her father's gray eyes, and she was welcomed into the clan with celebration and joy. Dorian held his daughter for the first time and felt something shift deep in his chest. This was what he had been fighting for, he realized. Not abstract concepts of peace or political alliances, but this tiny life that represented hope. A future where human and orc children could grow up as siblings, where the old hatreds would slowly fade into history. He looked at Liana, exhausted but radiant, and at Kesha standing beside the bed with tears in her amber eyes. He thought about grandmother Raka and Master Harlan, about the promises that had led him to this impossible moment. And he knew that every choice, every sacrifice, every difficult decision had been worth it. "Welcome to the world, little one," he whispered to his daughter. "You are going to help us build something amazing." 5 years passed. 5 years of slow, patient work, of building bridges between communities that had been enemies for generations. Not every attempt succeeded. There were still incidents of violence, still communities on both sides that refused to engage. But there were also successes that would have been unthinkable when Dorian first arrived at the Cross Farm. Several human towns now traded regularly with orc clans, exchanging goods and knowledge. A handful of marriages had taken place between humans and orcs, following the path Dorian and Kesha had almost walked. Children from both species played together at the border, learning each other's languages and games. Scholars from human universities came to study orc craftsmanship and history, while orc youths traveled to human settlements to learn farming techniques and medicine. It was not perfect. It was messy and complicated and sometimes frustrating, but it was real, and it was growing. Dorian stood at the edge of the Stoneback clan's territory on a warm summer evening, watching his daughter play with a group of orc children. Liana was 5 now, fluent in both human tongue and orcish, completely comfortable in both worlds. She was teaching the orc children a human game while they showed her how to track animals by their prints. The sight filled Dorian with fierce pride and hope. Liana came up beside him, pregnant again with their second child. They had built a good life here, splitting their time between the clan and their farm, which was now managed by a young human couple who had also chosen to live peacefully near the border. It was not the life Dorian had imagined when he made that promise to Master Harlan, but it was better than anything he could have dreamed. "You think we actually did it?" Liana asked, watching their daughter laugh. "You think we changed things?" Dorian thought about Grandmother Raka's impossible task, about standing before the clan elders and asking them to believe in peace. He thought about all the small choices and brave decisions that had led them to this moment. "I think we started something," he said finally. "Whether it lasts will depend on all the people who come after us, who choose to build instead of destroy. But yes, we changed things. We proved it was possible." He pulled Liana close, feeling her lean into him. "Your father would be proud of what we have built. And I like to think Grandmother Raka is watching somewhere, pleased that her impossible task actually worked." "They would both be proud," Liana agreed. She looked up at him, and there was love and contentment in her eyes. "Thank you for keeping your promise to my father. For staying when you could have left. For building this life with me." "Thank you for saying yes," Dorian replied. "For being brave enough to try something impossible. For loving me even when I was too foolish to see it." They stood together in the fading light, watching their daughter play between two worlds, and Dorian Fletcher felt something he had not felt since before the wars. True peace. Not the absence of conflict, but the presence of hope. The knowledge that tomorrow could be better than today, that the work they were doing mattered. He had promised a dying man that he would protect his daughter, and he had kept that promise in ways neither of them could have anticipated. He had been given an impossible task by an orc elder, something no human had ever tried, and he had somehow succeeded. But most importantly, he had found love and purpose in the last place he expected, at the edge of civilization where two worlds met. It was not a perfect ending. There would be more challenges ahead, more obstacles to overcome. But it was a good ending, a happy one, built on courage and kindness and the simple faith that people could change if they chose to. And in the end, that was enough.